everybody, Questwise here, and today's video is going to be a little different. This is not one that I had planned on doing today, but I started working on something, just a weird idea that I had, and I decided that I might as well include you all in this sort of journey that I'm taking. So I've been really enthralled with Ironsworn, and I know I promised you an Ironsworn call to adventure, the hero's journey kind of crossover idea, and we'll get to that, I promise. I'm working on some technical difficulties with that, with my camera. Trying to do some new stuff with as far as editing goes, but I'm really enthralled with Ironsworn. I love the mechanic in this for generating results, and I just can't get my mind away from Ironsworn and how well it works for solo role playing. And one of the other things that I wanted to kind of showcase that I'm doing is a couple of different things. How to use Ironsworn, the rules for different aspects of gaming, as well as utilizing tools that you have around to run solo games. So by that I mean I'm using a variety of things today, from different games that I have around the house, different items that I have, and incorporating them all into my solo role-playing experience. The thing I love about solo role-playing, and really role-playing in general, because it's a storytelling, it's an act of storytelling and myth-making, is that you can pull in anything that you want from different sources that you own, and it works particularly well with solo role-playing because you're really trying to entertain yourself. And by doing so, why not utilize all the tools that you have to make the game your very own? So at the basis, the core of this, we're going to be using Ironsworn, mostly for the dice mechanic, for a lot of the tables and such as well too. But as you can see up here, we're actually using the map from Forbidden Lands to generate a story. Because it's pretty generic, there's a few things that are listed on there, but I'll use them and just turn them into my world. But I also want to incorporate a few other things as well too. So first and foremost, I'm actually going to be using some of these creature cards from Visitation, just because I think they're really cool. And on the back, there are no stats. They're just simple little stories about each of the different creatures and how they sort of, their folklore behind them. So I want to utilize those a bit as well too. In addition to the Ironsworn rulebook, I'm going to try and to incorporate, I talked about this on Facebook the other day, but this is a book called Reign Enchiridion by Greg Stoltz. Reign was a game that he came out with, and the Enchiridion is basically a book of the generic rules for his game. And what this does is I want to do a separate video on this book as well too, but it is really interesting in that it generates, you're using a pool of D10s, 10-sided dice, to generate everything in one roll. So you're taking an action, or you're trying to do something, or something is happening, and you roll a pool of 10-sided dice, and you're generating the entire outcome based upon that one roll. What this Reign Enchiridion does really well is it does epic level events. So by that I mean that things like empire level type things. If you want to see how one kingdom interacts with another one during a diplomatic mission, in one roll you can see how that happens. If you want to be the ruler of a kingdom and send spies into another kingdom, you can generate the results of that all with one roll. And I think that's what I want to use this. I want to incorporate this into my game by using those ideas of what's going on in the world up here outside of my control. And I'm going to use that somehow during this game to generate those ideas. I also picked this up a few days ago, last week, something like that. This is Random Tables and Cities and Towns. by Dr. Tim Woods. This is really all this is a book of random tables, and I'm going to use this to just pull up some as an oracle when I come into a town or a city to talk about what I might find in those areas. This is a really cool book. I highly recommend having a copy at your table, whether you're playing socially or solo role playing as well too. Then I'm also going to use this supplement that came with the Forbidden Lands box set. More, I'm going to use it for the legends generator. So when I come to a point where I need a legend of something that has happened, I can generate that aspect with some dice rolls. I'm also going to use it to generate some monsters and some stats, probably using the cards from Vaesen. I'll detail up exactly what the sort of randomly what the traits and stuff of each of these creatures might be. So the background, the reason I started this whole thing, if you've watched this channel at all in the past, you would know that I am a big fan of folklore and folk tales and mythology, but I'm also a very big fan of visitation fiction, or it's sometimes known as portal fiction. The idea that a character is drawn from our world, our normal everyday Earth, and is transported to a fantasy or science fiction world. So stories like John Carter of Mars, Princess of Mars, John Carter of Mars, by Edgar Rice Burroughs. Terry Brooks did a series, which I really enjoyed, called Magic Kingdom for Sale Sold, in which a man he lost his wife, and he had answered a newspaper ad to buy a Magic Kingdom, and of course it was real, and he's transported into this world where he now becomes the ruler. Gosh, there's so many other great ones out there as well too, and they're all sort of eluding my thoughts right now. Yeah, there's a ton of great ones out there. Wizard, and I believe it's called Knight and Wizard. Those are a little bit older. I'm drawing a blank on who wrote those. But those are really cool, about a kid who transported into this fantasy world, and he's now a knight, learns magic along the way, and he's writing a story back to himself on Earth. Really good stuff. Really cool things out there. Everything from the sort of whimsical and lighthearted to some very dark and serious matters out there too. So what I've done is I want to incorporate that idea into Ironsworn. I wanted to see if I can do a visitation fiction or a portal fiction idea using Ironsworn as the basis for this. Using the map from Forbidden Lands. And up here you'll see I have some stuff laid out. These are random pieces and parts that I salvaged out of an old Settlers of Catan game that I had. When I upgraded to the new one, I had all these old tokens, so I just stole them from that. So on the map there was a few things listed, and I've used the small tokens to represent little towns and villages that are scattered across this area of the map. The larger one is actually a city, and then there were some fortifications up here as well too, so I added those to the map. There's a little purple token over here is actually going to represent where we arrive. It's our portal. It's how we get, it's a space that we wake up in. And I'm going to use this token to represent us. This is a little token again from Cities and Knights from Settlers of Catan. I'm going to use this to move around the board to show where we're located in our travels along the way. I've made up a character sheet. Our character we're going to be playing is Jensen Whiteley. I just used a piece of paper because some of the stuff on the Ironsworn character sheet just didn't seem to fit with what I was trying to do. But we do have our normal stats up here. I've added heart. I think that Jensen is very... he's very strong in when it comes to being open and empathetic to things. I did iron and wit, says he's very strong-willed, and of course, because he's from Earth and entering into this fantasy world, his edge and his shadow a little less. we have our bonds list here as well too, which we don't have any yet. Again, we're going to modify Ironsworn a little bit to do this. But bonds, he doesn't have any currently yet because he hasn't met anyone here in this world. And I started him off with 2 vows. Our background vow is find my way back home. And I set that as epic because I think that's going to be for me, during playing this out over the series of games, that's going to be the ultimate goal. And it's going to be very, very hard to try to find my way back home. And then the second one would be to discover where I am. I made that one a little less, I made it dangerous, a little less difficult. Because it's going to be a little bit easier for me to travel around the map and figure out just exactly where I'm at. As far as the background story for this character, and you start the game with 3 of these trait cards, or assets as they're called in the game. I decided to take a companion that I arrive here, but I have my old faithful, old Ben with me. He's my dog. He arrives. He's very loyal. That's the aspect on this card that I chose. With the companion and the hound, you get to choose one of the 3 to start off with. And I decided that I'm going to go with loyal, which means that when I endure stress in the game, I get to do that with a +1 if old Ben is with me. As far as what my character is I believe that he is an author. I think he writes fantasy stories, and the idea is that he's now he wakes up one day, something happens, I haven't really decided yet what, maybe he doesn't even really remember, but Jensen wakes up in this fantasy world that's not of his creation. It's completely new, and he has to discover it. But I think he has a little bit of a leg up on fantasy worlds since he's an author, and I want to say like best-selling author of fantasy novels. So he has an idea of how fantasy worlds kind of work. So I took Story Weaver as his path. Of course, it makes sense. He's an author. So when I secure an advantage, compel, or forge a bond by sharing an inspiring or enlightening song, poem, or tale, envision the story that I tell, and then I add +1 and take +1 momentum on a hit. I thought that just seemed very thematic, and I'm going to go with that. Also, because he's an author and maybe even a role player, I picked improviser, which means that he's very good at sort of improvising in his situation and trying to make the best that he can do. And because he is an author, because he's a story weaver, he already kind of has a leg up on how fantasy worlds work. So with improviser, when you check your gear, you may roll plus wits instead of supply. And if you do, envision how you make do with a clever situation and take +1 momentum on a hit. So those are my assets. Those are my paths, my story, my sort of traits, as it were, for this character. Now, there's a couple of things to track in Ironsworn if you haven't played before. There's momentum, supply, spirit, and health. And I've made normally this is on the side of the character sheet when you play. I made up a little card so I can keep track of those things with dice as I play along. Where this is really going, I have no idea. It was just something I was playing with, and I wanted to see if this would work. And so far, it's been really enjoyable. I haven't even really started the game. I simply created a character, came up with the concept, and I want to try to incorporate all these fun other aspects into Ironsworn using, Rain and Kyridian, some random tables, and then building adventures. I think that the world is going to be based on folklore of Northern Europe, England, Sweden, that kind of stuff. Based upon, I want to use these cards, some of these creatures, as things that he's going to encounter instead of the normal sort of goblins and orcs and other fantasy creatures. And I think, because I don't know as a thing, as a player, I think we're going to figure out that Jensen, basically all he knows is that he remembers that he's a writer, and he knows that he's not at home. He's not on Earth anymore. But he doesn't remember how he got here or how to find his way home. And so that's going to be the story that I'm going to try to explore. So first off, what I'm going to do is, if we look up here at the map, this is basically the little purple cone is where we've arrived, and it's in this sort of grassy plain. next to a river. I kind of envision the fact that he wakes one day because the sun is shining in his eyes. He can hear the rush of the water near him. And he awakes and to find himself in a very foreign place and begins to set out into this world, not really knowing that any of these other places exist, but maybe just seeing the river and trying to go from there. Old Ben by his side as well too. Just a quick little video. Like I said, unfortunately, I'm working out some technical difficulties, some other stuff that I'm working on right now. But I wanted to give you a little thought process into how solo role-playing can be an expansive experience, that you can use anything in your collection to sort of come up with ideas to generate and to make the game more fulfilling. I love bits and chits and tokens and dice. So to be able to incorporate all of this stuff into my experience, to keep track of things and to envision things in my head really, really helps. And so I just wanted to, for those of you who might be new into solo role-playing and trying it out during these times of being sort of isolated a lot more, there are tons of ways to do this. There are tons of ways to spark your imagination. You can go outside of the bounds of just this book and the things that it creates. Now, Ironsworn does do some great things, like has these card decks and stuff that you can have, and I love having cards to reference for things. But I also love having extra things that I can see and tangible items that I can manipulate a little bit. That really sparks my imagination. But there's tons of stuff that you can do with solo role playing, and in different ways to do to expand games that you already know and love by using extra printed materials as well too, to create the stories that you want to tell. I'm Questwise, and until next time, stay safe and game on, my friends.